I refused to allow my neighbor access to my garden spigot during a drought. Days later, my sprinkler system was ripped up, and Water Hoarder was painted across my garage. He claimed innocence, until I found a hose running from his garage, buried beneath my lawn. When I turned off his main valve, I heard a loud crash, and when I went to investigate, I discovered. I live in Mesquite, Texas. If you've never been here, it's the kind of suburb where people mow their lawns twice a week just to be seen doing it. HOA patrols drive by like cops. People wave fake smiles but talk trash the moment your back's turned. I bought my house 3 years ago after selling my mechanic shop in Fort Worth. I was ready for a quieter life. My wife passed from cancer 2 years before that, and I needed a reset. I started gardening. Not as therapy, not because it was cute, but because it gave me something to do every single day that made sense. I grew tomatoes, bell peppers, cucumbers, and squash. I even built a small greenhouse off the side of the garage. That garden became everything to me. The summer I'm talking about, Texas was under a brutal drought. The city issued watering restrictions, twice a week max. No sprinklers after 10 a.m. If you got caught breaking the rules, they'd fine you. I followed every rule. Hand-watered my plants early in the morning, and only what was needed. I even installed a rain barrel for emergencies. My next-door neighbor, Rick, was a different story. Guy looked like every old high school quarterback who peaked too soon. Early 50s, still wore muscle shirts, always outside puffing his chest. He was the kind of guy who called people champ in a way that made you want to punch him. His lawn? Bright green. Always green. Too green. While everyone else's grass was dying, his looked like a golf course. I knew something was off. One evening, I was watering my garden when Rick walked over. He leaned on the fence like we were buddies, even though we barely talked. "Hey man," he said. "Think I could run a quick hose off your spigot once or twice a week? City's got my pressure all jacked up. I can't get anything flowing." I looked at him for a second. I thought about it. But deep down, I didn't trust him. "Sorry, Rick. We're all under the same restrictions. I've got my garden to think about." He smiled. "Tight. Fake. Right. Of course. Just figure neighbors help neighbors. Guess I figured wrong." He walked off without another word. That was a Tuesday. Saturday morning, I walked out to find my front yard trashed. My sprinkler system was destroyed. Pipes cracked, ripped out of the ground. The control box smashed. It looked like someone went at it with a crowbar. And across my garage door, in giant red spray paint, were the words, "Water Hoarder." I just stood there for a minute, stunned. I didn't even touch anything. Just stared. I called the police. They came, took pictures, asked if I had cameras. I didn't, mistake on my part. They made a report but didn't sound hopeful. That afternoon, Rick came out with his coffee and made a big show of stretching and looking at the damage. "Damn shame," he said. "People are nuts these days. Maybe someone thought you were wasting water." He smiled. Walked back inside. I knew it was him. I couldn't prove it, but I knew. I kept quiet for 2 days. I didn't say a word. But something kept bothering me. How did whoever did this know exactly where my underground sprinkler lines were? How did they avoid getting caught? Why paint that specific message? Then I noticed something weird along the side yard, this thin, sloppy trench in the dirt. It was barely visible, but it looked fresh. Like someone had dug and tried to fill it back in. So I grabbed a shovel and started digging. Not deep, maybe 2 feet down, I hit something. A hose. Not a hose. My hose. It had been connected to my garden spigot, run under my lawn, and fed straight through a small hole in the wooden fence, into Rick's backyard. Or more specifically, into his garage. I followed it all the way up to the wall of his garage, and felt rage boil in my chest. That smug son of a bitch had been stealing my water. After I told him no. And then he had the nerve to destroy my sprinkler system, spray paint my garage, and act like he didn't know a thing? I didn't call the cops. I wasn't done yet. That night, I waited until just after dark. I went down to the basement and shut off the valve that controlled the outdoor spigots. Then I turned off the main water to the house, just for a second, to make sure the pressure dropped. 30 minutes later, I heard a loud bang from Rick's garage. It sounded like something heavy tipping over and slamming to the floor. I walked out, pretending to take out trash. The garage door was slightly open. I knocked. "Rick? Everything all right?" No answer. So I walked up and looked through the crack. That's when I saw it. Inside his garage was a full setup, 2 huge 100-gallon barrels, both connected to MY hose. One of the barrels had fallen over, crushing his red Craftsman lawnmower. Water was everywhere. He had pressure valves, timers, filters. The guy had built a whole illegal irrigation system off my spigot. I pushed the garage door open the rest of the way. A second later, Rick came storming in from the house, red-faced, wearing nothing but shorts and socks. "What the hell are you doing in my garage?" "I could ask you the same thing," I said. I pointed to the hose, still dripping. "That's not yours," he said immediately. I walked up and picked up the nozzle. There was a small scratch on the metal where I'd etched my initials a year ago. I held it up and showed him. "This scratch? That's mine. This hose is mine." He froze. Then he said, "You can't prove I stole water. You don't know what this is for. I know you destroyed my sprinkler system. I know you vandalized my garage." Rick's face turned pale. Then red. Then pale again. "Get out of my garage," he said. "Right now." I stepped back. But before I left, I said, "You really think you're going to get away with this?" His face changed again, less rage, more nervous. Like maybe, finally, he realized I wasn't someone to screw with. And he had no idea what was coming next. The next day, I filed a formal complaint with the city. I included the pictures I took of the hose, the barrels, the setup in his garage. I also mentioned the vandalism, though I admitted I had no proof for that part. They said someone from the water department would come out within the week. I didn't hold my breath. Rick stopped making eye contact after that. No smug smiles. No phony small talk. Just slammed doors and drawn curtains. But I wasn't done. I wasn't just going to wait around for the city to maybe fine him. I wanted to make sure he never forgot what he did. So I started digging, figuratively this time. I talked to the neighbor 2 doors down, Mrs. Hadley. She's a widow, late 60s, walks her dog every evening. I asked if she'd seen anything the night of the vandalism. She lowered her voice and said, "I didn't want to get involved, but I saw Rick out late that night. Around 1 a.m. He was carrying something. Maybe a spray can." I asked if she'd be willing to say that to the cops. She looked nervous. "If I have to, yes." That was all I needed. I went back to the police, this time with her statement, and asked to update the vandalism report. The officer nodded slowly and said, "That lines up with the timeline. You should press charges if you want to go further." But before I could even think about that, things got worse. 3 nights later, I came home to find my greenhouse broken into. The side panel was kicked in. Shelves knocked over. Half my tomato plants destroyed. Tools gone. The whole place smelled like weed killer. Something had been sprayed everywhere. And right there, stuck to the inside glass with duct tape, was a note. "No one likes a rat." I called the police again. This time, they took it seriously. 2 officers came out, took more photos, and said they'd patrol the area for a while. But I knew Rick wouldn't get caught in the act. He was too sneaky. That's when I realized I needed to go on offense. First, I got cameras. 4 of them. Motion activated. Hidden well, 1 at the side fence, 1 at the garage, 1 pointing at the greenhouse, and 1 right on the spigot. Then I went back to the city records and started digging into Rick's property info. I found something interesting. His house was behind on taxes. Not a huge amount, but enough that it flagged on their system. He'd also gotten 3 citations for HOA violations over the last year. One more, and they could take it up with the collections attorney. So I made a call to the HOA. I told them everything. The illegal irrigation. The hidden barrels. The unauthorized digging. And I sent pictures. They sent a notice that week. I didn't see it, but I heard about it. Rick's shouting match with the mailman was loud enough to hear through the fence. And just when I thought things had started to cool off, one of my cameras caught something. It was around 2:30 in the morning. A shadow climbed over the fence. Tall. Thin. Hoodie pulled tight. They crouched by the garden for a minute. Then stood up and aimed a canister at the soil. Some kind of sprayer. I ran outside in time to see the figure dart back toward the fence and slip over it. I couldn't see the face, but I knew who it was. And this time, I had video. The cops came out again. I handed over the footage. "This is enough for trespassing and attempted vandalism," one of the officers said. "If you want to press charges, we can bring him in." But I had a better idea. I told them to wait. The next day, I walked over to Rick's house for the first time since it all started. Knocked on the door. He opened it just a crack. His face looked tired. Nervous. "What do you want?" he said. "I want you to come to my garage. I have something to show you." He laughed once. "Not a chance." I leaned in and said, "It's footage. Of you climbing my fence, trying to poison my garden." Again. "You want to see how clearly your face shows up when the camera goes to night vision?" He stared at me for a second, then slammed the door. 5 minutes later, I got a call. Blocked number. "You think you're clever?" It was his voice. Cold. "You started this." "Not me." Then he hung up. That was his mistake. Because I hadn't started anything. But I was going to finish it. After that phone call, I didn't hear from Rick for a few days. But I saw him. He stopped parking in his driveway. Started pulling around back through the alley like he was hiding. He put up curtains in his garage windows and a thick tarp along the shared fence. He was scared. But not enough. I waited a full week before I made my move. I needed time to set up everything: documents, statements, footage, calls. I wanted every domino lined up before I tipped the first one. Here's what I did. First, I filed the footage with the police. Trespassing, attempted vandalism, and theft. I pressed full charges. Second, I mailed copies of the hose photos, water barrel setup, and night vision video to the Mesquite Water Department. They launched an investigation. Third, I sent the same package to our HOA, again. Along with Mrs. Hadley's statement. But the fourth piece? That was personal. See, I learned something interesting during my digging. Rick wasn't just behind on taxes, he was behind on his mortgage. I found the property's loan details on public record. It had been refinanced twice. I checked his job status through LinkedIn. He hadn't updated in over a year. I started putting it together. He was broke. So I made one more call, to a local news station. I told them everything. I gave them copies of the evidence. The water theft during a drought. The illegal trench. The attack on my greenhouse. They jumped on it like flies on rotting meat. A week later, the story aired on the local evening news. Mesquite man accused of stealing neighbor's water amidst drought. They didn't blur his face. They showed his garage setup. The spray paint on my garage door. They even interviewed me and Mrs. Hadley, with her tiny poodle yapping at her feet while she called him a disgrace to the neighborhood. That was the beginning of the end for Rick. Within 48 hours, the city issued him a $7,500 fine for water theft and property damage. The HOA moved to begin foreclosure proceedings for repeated violations and unpaid dues. The bank posted a foreclosure notice 2 weeks later. Turns out I wasn't the only one who knew Rick was defaulting. And then came the police. They arrested him in his own driveway. Trespassing. Theft. Vandalism. He tried to say it was a misunderstanding. Claimed I was framing him because of a neighbor dispute. But the video footage was ironclad. They booked him, and he spent a weekend in county lockup before making bail. The neighborhood turned on him overnight. People stopped waving. Stopped saying hi. Stopped letting their kids walk past his house. His lawn turned yellow in a matter of days. Without my water, it curled and died. HOA slapped another citation on him for landscape negligence. He tried to sell the house. But nobody wanted it. The online listing was flooded with comments from locals linking the news report. Water thief's house, buyer beware. It sat for 6 months, price dropping every week. Eventually, the bank took it. I watched from my porch as a repo crew showed up with a locksmith and changed the locks. Rick was gone. Evicted. Humiliated. Finished. But it didn't stop there. 3 months later, a local friend of mine who works in plumbing supply called me. Said a guy came in looking for low-cost irrigation barrels and didn't realize he knew me. It was Rick. Living out of a camper on the east side of Dallas. No job. No money. Probably still blaming me for everything. But here's the truth. I didn't ruin Rick's life. Rick ruined Rick's life. All I did was make sure the consequences caught up to him. As for me, I rebuilt my greenhouse. Got new sprinklers. Planted fresh vegetables in the spring. Tomatoes bloomed like crazy that year. And every time I turned on my spigot I smiled. Because I knew no one was stealing from me ever again.